There are thoughts that do not ask for permission. They arrive at night when the world is silent and whisper the name of someone who is no longer here. A voice inside asks, why are they still living in me when they're no longer part of my life? You try to move on, but some memories feel like echoes etched into your skin. It's not just thinking, it's reliving. That sensation in your chest when their name appears in a song, that dream you can't explain, that inner dialogue you never meant to start but can't seem to end. What if this isn't about being stuck? What if your soul remembers something your mind had to bury to protect you? CarlJung once wrote, "The psyche contains things it refuses to see, not because they are unimportant, but because they are too important." And Bruce Lipton reminds us, trauma is not only mental, it's cellular. Your nervous system remembers the emotion even when your thoughts pretend to forget. So the question is not, why can't I stop thinking about them? But rather, what part of me is still calling out from where I left it? What if you're not meant to forget? What if you're meant to understand? What follows is not a formula to move on. It's a path back into the sacred fragments that still live within you. There's a moment in certain connections that is more than memory. It becomes a mirror. And sometimes what you can't stop thinking about isn't them. It's the person you were when you were with them. That version of you, more vulnerable, more alive, more open, didn't vanish. She stayed behind, waiting in a room that was never fully closed. You think, if I could just forget, I'd be free. But what if forgetting is not freedom, it's exile? What if true liberation is not in erasing them, but in returning for the part of your soul you left behind? CarlJung described the shadow not as darkness, but as what we fail to integrate. You're not trying to get them back. You're trying to remember a forgotten self, one who still waits to be seen. The longing is not for their presence, but for your own voice, still echoing in that chapter. Like a woman calling out through someone else's name, not realizing she's searching for herself in the silence he left behind. There's no need to fight the memory. It's not a ghost, it's a fragment, and fragments do not haunt, they call. He appeared like someone arriving from a dream you forgot you once had. Not just a man, but a presence, a symbol, an echo of something ancient moving inside you. It wasn't him, not really. It was what he reflected, the protector you yearned for, the lover you read about in silent fantasies, the divine father your soul never fully met. CarlJung would call this projection a psychic phenomenon where the inner world leaks into the outer one. You thought he awakened something rare, so it must be fate. But perhaps fate is not what happens to us. It's what is revealed in us through others. Bruce Lipton might say his presence triggered dormant pathways in your biology, but the source was always inside you. He was not the flame. He was the match. And when he left, it wasn't just grief, it was disorientation. Because you weren't mourning a person, you were mourning the mirror. Like Psyche, wandering in search of Eros, not knowing she wasn't chasing him. She was being led back to her own soul. You miss the energy, but what you truly long for is to reunite with the archetype he embodied. And that, perhaps, is the deeper invitation. Not to find him again, but to find the part of you he once reflected. Sometimes the past returns not as nostalgia, but as repetition. You think you're remembering, but in truth, you're reliving. The mind circles back again and again, not because it wants to, but because the soul was never heard the first time. There's a wound still waiting to be seen, not bandaged, not fixed, just witnessed. You might believe it's unhealthy to dwell. But what if the dwelling is not disease, but the body's way of pointing to a place that never received closure? CarlJung reminds us, what we resist in the unconscious does not disappear. It manifests as fate, as repetition, as echo. And Bruce Lipton shows us how unprocessed emotion becomes imprinted into the cells, turning memory into biology. So you analyze, you overthink, you numb, but the ache persists, like a scratched vinyl repeating the same line. not to torment you, but to draw your ear to where the music broke. This is not madness, it's memory searching for voice, grief rehearsing its forgotten role. And until that silent wound is acknowledged, your soul may keep whispering the same line, hoping one day it will finally be heard. There are absences that linger not in the mind, but in the body. You don't just miss them, you feel them, like a presence still breathing beside you in the spaces they once filled. Science might say it's the nervous system, wired to remember emotional intensity as if it were still happening. Bruce Lipton explains, the body doesn't distinguish between past and present when trauma is involved. The chemistry of love and the shock of its loss are both written into your biology. CarlJung would call this a psychic imprint, a pattern etched not just into memory, but into the very rhythm of your being. You believe you've let go, but your body hasn't caught up. That's why new relationships feel dim, why joy tastes diluted, because you're still calibrated to the voltage of that emotional storm, like an old house wired for candlelight. You can't yet hold the brightness of a different current, so you unconsciously compare, not out of longing, but out of familiarity. You are not broken, you are remembering. And until that internal voltage rewrites itself, your body may keep reaching for a ghost it believes is still home. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Some stories return not through memory, but through symbols. You turn on the radio, and there it is, a phrase, a name, a dream that feels more like a visitation than fiction. It's easy to believe they must be thinking of me, but the soul speaks differently, not with logic but with layers, not with clarity but with codes. CarlJung called this symbolic language the realm of the unconscious, where dreams, signs and synchronicities act like bridges between what is known and what is not yet integrated. Bruce Lipton would say, your perceptions shape your biology. So when a familiar image appears, your entire being responds, as if that moment was sacred. Perhaps these signs aren't messages from them, but messages from you, from the part of you that still carries meaning in their presence. It's not obsession, it's a signal, not that you should return to them, but that something in you is ready to be remembered. Like the moon pulling the tides, the image of them stirs something beneath your surface, an emotional current, a psychic nudge, and when it happens again, the dream, the lyric, the time on the clock, perhaps it's not a coincidence. Perhaps it's the language of your soul, reaching through metaphor to lead you gently back to what still needs to be seen. Some endings never arrive, they just stop. Abruptly, silently, leaving behind not closure, but suspension. It wasn't just the relationship that ended. It was a story with no final page, a sentence still open, a chapter that your soul keeps rereading, hoping that this time the conclusion will arrive. CarlJung spoke of individuation as the path to wholeness, but when a story freezes mid-journey, your psyche can remain tethered to the moment of rupture. You sense it in the stagnation, in the paused creativity, in the emotional fatigue that has no clear source. You want to move forward, but part of you is still waiting for an explanation, a return, a goodbye that never came. Bruce Lipton reminds us, what is emotionally incomplete doesn't dissolve. It imprints itself into the cells, shaping identity through what was never resolved. And so life begins to echo that pause. You attract similar patterns. You avoid certain joys, not because you don't want them, but because part of your inner world is still frozen in that old scene. He wasn't just a person. He became the embodiment of what was left unfinished, and the soul, longing for coherence, keeps replaying the scene, not to romanticize it, but to complete the cycle it never got to close. Like a novel with its last chapter torn out, you return to the last known sentence, not to relive it, but because some part of you is still writing the ending. There are sorrows we never chose, but somehow they chose us. Pain that became a kind of companion, not because it comforts, but because it reminds us of something once deeply real. Some bonds are made not in presence, but in rupture, not in words, but in the quiet spaces left behind. CarlJung would call it a psychic imprint, a sacred contract the unconscious makes with experience, so that what was too big to feel all at once can be carried slowly over time. You didn't decide to keep carrying them, but the part of you that was transformed by their presence never fully knew how to let go without erasing what it had become. Bruce Lipton suggests that the memory of emotional trauma is not just mental, it's cellular. And so the pain persists, not because you're broken, but because the wound became part of your inner architecture. You say it feels like karma, as if some debt must be paid in longing. But what if the pain isn't punishment? What if it's metamorphosis, like the caterpillar resisting the cocoon, not knowing that within that darkness, the wings are forming? You carry the ache, not because you cannot heal, but because something in you is still becoming through it. And until that transformation completes, the soul will continue honoring its silent vow. I will not forget what changed me. And there is a kind of nostalgia that isn't for a person, but for who you were when you felt illuminated by them. You think it's them you miss, their voice, their eyes, their presence. But if you look closely, what you're really longing for is the feeling that was awakened inside you when their soul touched yours. CarlJung believed that every meaningful encounter holds the seed of a deeper encounter with the self, and what feels like absence may simply be the echo of a sacred recognition. Bruce Lipton reminds us, you are not just reacting to people, you are responding to inner chemistry, to the awakening of dormant parts of your own being. They did not give you that light, they only revealed it. They did not plant the feeling, they stirred it from sleep. And now in their absence, you are left with the mistaken belief that the light left with them. But the truth is quieter and more painful and more beautiful. They were the sunbeam. You were the sky that received it. And the sacredness you felt, that expansion, that spiritual electricity, was always yours. You are not chasing a person. You are trying to return to the moment where you remembered your own depth. That is what you miss. That is what remains. You thought it was obsession, but maybe it was a sacred reminder. You believed you were stuck, but perhaps you were being asked to return, not to them, but to the place in you that awakened through them. Every memory, every echo, every tender ache was not a mistake of the mind, but a message from the soul. CarlJung once said, "The soul speaks in images," and sometimes those images wear the face of someone we thought we lost. Bruce Lipton teaches that the body remembers what the conscious mind buries. So when you think of them, it might not be a sign of weakness. It might be a call, a soft knocking from a part of you that was once fully alive. You're not just thinking of them. You're awakening the version of yourself that lived in the presence of something sacred. And maybe the real journey is not to erase them, but to integrate all that was felt, so you no longer need their memory to feel whole. Let your longing become a prayer. Let your memories become a mirror. Let the ache guide you, not toward reunion, but toward remembrance. And if something in you is still calling, it's not because you're lost, it's because you're arriving. If you made it this far, comment "Estoy despierta," and let those 3 words be a quiet ritual, a soul's way of saying, I no longer run from what hurts, I walk toward what heals.